My story actually starts with something my best friend saw, not me. We live in Boone, Iowa, and he has a house with a large shop on an acre of land. His lot butts up to a massive open field, so it feels like there's a lot more space, and what he saw out there kicked off a week of weirdness that ended with one of the creepiest things that's ever happened to me. I'll start with what my friend saw. He had been in the shop working on one of his 3 project cars and said he kept hearing something behind the building. This is a pole barn style shop with corrugated metal siding so you can hear things through it. While walking between the shop and his house, he saw something above the big field next to his property. It had been a clear fall night except for one spot above the field that he described as a patch of black. I guess there wasn't really a shape to it, at least not anything he could make out, but as he was watching, he saw thin streaks falling from the bottom of it. He told me there were 7 of them, one right after another, and each one looked like a needle-thin trail of smoke, almost like bottle rockets. They dropped fast and right in a row, then they went all the way down to the field, hitting the ground. He also said he could hear every one of them hit the ground with a clank and a thud at the same time. Those were his exact words. He related it to the sound of someone hitting a railroad spike into the ground. After seeing these bottle rocket-like things fall into the field, this dark object started casually drifting east toward town like a slow hot air balloon or blimp. He said he was able to watch it move in that direction for a few minutes, but since it blended into the dark sky so well, it was impossible to see as it got farther away. Then he just went into his house, and that was his whole story. He didn't know what it was, and there was no evidence of anything in the field when he went back out to the shop. I was shocked by his story and thought he had actually seen something incredible, but I want to say something about my friend. He is undiagnosed, but would definitely be on the autism spectrum. He has a genius level of knowledge when it comes to engines and retains information like no one else I've ever met. His entire life revolves around cars, and he has little room for anything outside of that world. If he's not actively working on a project, he's thinking about working on one. He's also logical to a fault and rarely shows emotion about anything, including what he saw that night. Basically, I'm saying this because he would never claim to have seen something if it didn't happen. He is a firm non-believer across the board without undeniable proof. Now I'll get to what I experienced. On the Saturday after his sighting, I was out there helping him on a resto-mod truck he was trying to finish for a show. Just a side note, it's a 66 F100 flare side, which is my dream truck, so at the time I was helping him almost every weekend just to get my hands on it. Around 10-something at night, I had to step out behind the shop to relieve myself. It's pretty dark back there, so you have to step over random car parts, but there's a 6-foot section of unkept grass that we use. When you're back there, it faces the big field next door, and the only separation is a wire fence. While I was standing in the grass, my eyes finally adjusted, and I almost peed on myself when I realized there was a small herd of deer standing right on the other side of the fence. They were 15 feet away, and every one of them was standing perfectly still and staring at me. I think it surprised me because it's not exactly a quiet process walking back there, and I would think hearing me would have made them take off, but these deer didn't seem bothered and they didn't move. I stared back at them and said a few things out loud while I finished. Then I made my way back around to go inside, and not a single one of them moved or walked away. When I got back into the shop, I let my friend know, but we were busy, so we finished up and I went home. That night was nothing more than me getting startled by deer. The next night, which was Sunday, I had left the house to pick up Subway because both of our kids had been sick and my wife and I were eating late after getting them to bed. On the way home, I was going by a park in our neighborhood called Franklin Park. As I drove past it with the park on my left side, there were 5 deer standing in the grass median between the sidewalk and the road. That by itself wouldn't be the weirdest thing in the world. We do have deer here. What made it weird was how close they were standing to each other. They were in a tight group, literally touching each other, and every one of them lifted their head up at the same time to watch me go by. I even slowed way down to look at them, and the eye contact was there again. Their heads followed me the entire time, and it just didn't seem normal. I also remember thinking, what are the odds I would see something like that 2 nights in a row? On Wednesday night of that same week, I had to drop something off at my friend's shop, so I drove out there after work and hung out with him for a while. When I went home, I was about to make the turn onto our street when another deer walked out into the road. This felt like it happened in slow motion, and I saw my headlights hit it. Since it's in a neighborhood, I wasn't going that fast, but I still had to hit the brakes hard to stop in time and ended up about 10 feet from it. This one was alone and stopped dead center in the road. It was slightly turned, but mostly facing me and looking directly at the front of my car. The first thing that hit me was how calm the thing was. It hadn't even flinched when I stopped. It also hit me that this was the third time in a week I'd had a run-in with a deer, and I was wondering why there were so many around. I tapped my horn a few times, but it did nothing. Then I rolled my window down and yelled at it to go on, but it stood there like a deer in the headlights. Yes, pun intended. Really though, it was not moving, so I decided to go around it. I idled forward and made my way around the right side of it, trying to be slow so it didn't freak out and run into my car. I was going to try the horn again to get it out of the road, but then I got this horrible feeling inside, and I don't know why. I felt the most unnatural connection to this deer, and I hated the way it was looking at me. My window was still all the way down, so as I went past, I was 3 feet away from its face with nothing between us. This deer slowly turned its head and followed me as I drove by with its eyes locked onto mine. It might not sound like it, but this was intense and scary to me, and it felt like I was looking into the eyes of something else. They were not the normal gentle deer eyes. These were dark black, and they seemed bigger than they should have been. When I finally made the turn and got around the corner, I could see it in my rearview mirror, still standing there until I was blocks away. That one moment gave me a sick feeling in my stomach for days. I've been around deer my whole life, but there was something wrong with that one. Of course, deer will look at you if you run into one, but this was different. It looked like it was watching me on purpose. The next time I was out at my friend's house, I was talking to him about the deer situation, and right after I told him about the one in the road, he cut in and told me that he had been seeing deer in the backfield too. On top of that, he also had one do something way out of character. I guess one of the deer he saw walked right up to the fence in the middle of the afternoon and stood there watching him work on his mower. My friend said he tossed half an apple over the fence, but it wasn't interested. I couldn't believe that something had happened to him too. After that one short week, it was like they all disappeared. I don't remember seeing another deer for months, not out at my friend's place or in town. I know wild animals can have different behaviors and be unpredictable. I also know deer like to move around, especially at night, but the timing of it was such a coincidence with my friend seeing what he did at the beginning of the week. It was like that dark object he saw came down from somewhere and took control of the local deer population. I've also heard stories about aliens being in plain sight and how they might be able to appear as someone or something else. Because these deer were acting so out of the ordinary, particularly the one I almost hit, I wonder if I was actually seeing deer. When I think about that and I remember the deep eye contact I had with the one in the road, it's pretty terrifying. There was more in that deer's eyes than a blank stare. My name is Reggie, aka Big Reg, and I used to own and run a pretty successful barbecue truck before COVID. My business went under in 2020, so I don't do it anymore, but I once had a customer that I have never forgotten. This was in 2016, and I had a lease to park my truck with 2 others in the parking lot of a business complex with several buildings. I don't want to say exactly where this was because I don't need a knock at my door from some agency, but I knew one of the buildings was a government building and it was completely unmarked. We would see people coming and going every day, and I know it had tight security, but I never knew what it was for. Back then, our bread and butter was the lunch crowd, and we'd be serving plates as fast as I could take orders. One day, this guy walked up right before the lunch rush, and I remember seeing him come across the parking lot from my window. There were always a lot of suits and lanyards around, but this guy stood out. Even from far away, he was tall, and I'm talking taller than average, like 6'7" or 6'8". Definitely basketball height with long arms and legs. When he got closer, you could see that this suit looked like it was the wrong size. It fit him in height, but not in his shape, like he was too skinny for it. He kind of looked like a little kid wearing a suit. When he got up to the window and was right in front of me, it was hard not to stare. His skin was damn near untouched by sunlight. Also, from a distance, I thought he had had really blue eyes because they were light, but when I got a good look at them, they weren't blue. They just didn't have any color. This man's irises were flat gray. I'm not kidding, they weren't gray-blue or light green. There was no color. Then he started asking me about my food, and I could hear an accent. I don't know any other languages apart from a little basic Spanish, so I could be way off, but my guess was that he was from an Eastern European country. He also had this stiff expression like he was trying to act natural but wasn't good at it. Overall, he was just a weird dude. When he looked up at my menu board, I don't think he really understood what we had listed, which I get if he didn't speak English very well, but the guy acted like he didn't even know what the food was, and I had pictures next to each item. My menu was pretty small, so I explained the way that it was laid out with entrees and sides. Eventually, he got a brisket plate with potato salad and beans, and I'll always remember this because when I gave him the plate of food, he held out both hands flat like he expected me to place it onto his palms, and that's an odd thing for a grown man to do. The last part of this crazy transaction was when he paid me. He pulled out two $10 bills, and they were both perfect and brand spanking new. I'm not saying I never saw crisp new cash, but it was just one more thing with him that wasn't normal. I gave him his change and watched him take the plate of food over to a bench we had right where two sidewalks came together and next to a big metal garbage can. I went back to work and had a few other people starting to show up for lunch, but I kept watching him as much as I could. He sat on that bench and picked at his food with a plastic fork for a good 30 minutes. In that amount of time, I only saw him take one small bite of brisket, and I never saw him touch the sides. He still had a full plate by the time my orders were slowing down. By that time, one of the guys that worked with me was getting in on it too, and we were both trying to watch him out the window without being seen. After sitting on the bench for so long, he stood up, went over to the trash can, and threw the whole thing away. I had a hard time seeing him do that, and if I'm being real about it, I was offended. I know barbecue isn't for everybody, but my brisket has made people emotional. Seeing a full plate of it get tossed out after one bite really rubbed me the wrong way. I almost went out to ask him if something was wrong with it. After he threw the food away, he went back to the bench but stood next to it instead of sitting down, and he stayed perfectly still. We kept looking at him too, and I don't mean he was just relaxed. He didn't even move his arms or look around. He looked like a dang mannequin standing there. I don't remember how long he stayed like that. It was definitely a few minutes, but after a little while, a full-sized black Escalade rolled up and stopped right next to the sidewalk where he was standing. It was brand new and every window in it was blacked out. Nobody got out of it or rolled the window down, but the back passenger door opened and the guy walked over and got in. Then the door shut and they drove away. I worked at that location for another year on the same schedule and with the same people I'd see all the time. I had never seen that guy before and I never saw him again, and trust me, I was looking for him. It's been like 9 years now since this happened and I've never forgotten about it. I used to get all kinds of customers from every walk of life, but he stood out above all of them. I've never met or seen anyone like him in my life. I don't even pretend to know anything about the government or what kind of secret things they have going on, but that guy had to be involved with something. Especially since he got picked up the way he did. He definitely could have passed as a secret agent or one of the real men in black. For all I know, he was an alien himself, and I mean that because how can a person have gray eyes? I don't even think that's possible, not without special contact lenses anyway. A lot of people in New Mexico like to talk about this stuff because we're famous for it with the Roswell case and all, and I've gotten some great reactions when I've told the story. I was never into the UFO thing in any kind of serious way until that day, but after my experience with that customer, I've wondered about it more than I ever thought I would. Whoever he was, I'm glad he never came back because he made me uncomfortable. He was also the only person that hasn't liked my brisket, and that still bothers me. On November 3rd, 2021, my experience started as a straightforward drive from Sedona up to Flagstaff in Arizona. This is a drive I had done many times and I knew it well. Shortly after leaving Sedona, though, everything spiraled into the most unexplainable experience of my life. I don't really know how to describe this first part, but somewhere around the Oak Creek Canyon area, time felt like it slipped away from me and I had no memory of driving for the remaining 40 minutes. My next moment of real awareness came as I was getting into Flagstaff. This was when it hit me that the trip had not only felt like it was 10 minutes long, but that I couldn't remember any of the actual driving like I had been on autopilot. It felt like I had fallen asleep in someone's car and gotten a ride there. Surprisingly, the most troubling part of this wasn't the lost awareness or missing time. It was what started coming to me after the fact. Over the next few days, I was trying to come to terms with the reality I had either severely zoned out or I'd had some kind of brain trauma or amnesia, and that's what had caused it. I was so confused by it, I had started searching for sleep driving cases, like sleepwalking but in a car, even though I didn't believe that was possible. I missed days at work during this time and was doing anything I could to feel normal afterward, including meditation and a juice cleanse on the advice of a friend, which didn't help. Not that I thought it would, but she was convinced that what happened was related to my stress level at the time. When I finally went back to work, I was hoping to move past it, but then I started to notice things that seemed to come out of nowhere. The first was this incredibly heightened sense for higher-pitched sounds. Certain tones were unbelievably loud to me, and I had no idea why. I had to change the text notification on my iPhone to a lower tone because the high-pitched ding I had used forever was ear-piercing. I couldn't believe how sensitive my ears were to it. The next problem was lethargy. For about 2 weeks after coming home from Sedona, I was sluggish and tired and not really enthusiastic about anything. I would come home from work and barely be able to stay awake long enough to eat something for dinner. Then I'd go to bed and feel tired again in the morning after 10 hours of sleep. It got to the point where I was worried I might have a serious condition going on, but this was when something new came and it changed my mind about what happened during my drive and also explained the symptoms I'd been having. I started having dreams about being in this place way up above the desert where I could look down and see cars driving on a road that went through red rocks and hills. It was like the view you'd see from a small plane at maybe 5,000 feet. Then, while I was in this place, I started having conversations with other beings that were eerily similar to humans, but somehow I knew they weren't exactly like us. I didn't know who they were, but I knew they weren't from here. I only ever remembered about 10% of what we would talk about after waking up, but there are a couple of key parts that I've never forgotten. One quick disclaimer. A lot of this sounds pretty far out there, so take it however you want to, but I believe I made contact with something else and it happened during my drive. I also believe that these dreams I was having were showing me bits and pieces of what had actually happened. I am always open to any other theories or explanations, though. In my first dream, I remember learning about a small fraction of their technology. I don't know why this was the subject, it just was. They told me that they use kind of a neural lattice to communicate. Apparently, this is a very efficient way to sync up mentally with each other and with us if they need to. Through this neural lattice, thoughts and emotions and memories can be shared, but it was implied that it had to be consensual to work. I wish I had gotten more from this dream because it was so interesting, but that was all I woke up with. My second dream had conversations about health and medical treatments, and again, I don't know why that was the topic. I remember hearing about the way they perform operations and procedures on a microscopic scale, as well as being able to easily manipulate and change genetics. The most interesting part of this conversation was at the end of it when I learned that while they have the technology to greatly extend their lives by repairing injuries and curing disease, they still die exactly like we do. When they said that, I actually felt a sadness with it, and I mean that I could feel real grief and loss in myself from hearing the words. It was incredibly strange. They were basically saying to me that even at a much higher level of intelligence and technology, they still aren't any closer than we are to finding the answers of life or why we're all here. I had a few more of these dreams, but they were vague and I didn't come away with much more. I did ask a question though, and it was why us? I think I wanted to know why so many people have sightings and close encounters and abduction experiences. I didn't get an answer to it, but as soon as I asked, I had a very strong feeling of calm and safety come over me. I don't want to call it love, but it was similar and positive, maybe closer to just caring. I don't want anyone to think this was some kind of gift where I was taken by aliens and given amazing knowledge, because it wasn't that. I simply had a period of time that I cannot account for during a drive, then I had a few strange symptoms and dreams afterward. I've already said what my opinion is, and I think I made contact with something, but again, I'm open to any other theories as to why it all happened at once. The only thing I can say is that it changed my perspective, especially about life. It made me think a lot about our long-term future. Maybe someday we will be the ones finding and studying other more primitive life and occasionally making contact with them. Really, we kind of already do that now with other living things here on Earth, so I'm sure we'd do it elsewhere if we could. I absolutely and completely believe that we are not alone, and that really gives me a sense of peace. I think it's a good thing. To go the other direction and think that we could be totally alone, that's the thought that is terrifying to me. I want to thank everyone for watching another episode of Skywatcher Stories. If you like hearing these personal experiences of strange sightings and alien encounters, please subscribe because I upload new episodes every week and it really helps the channel. Until next time, keep watching the skies.